Hey everybody, welcome to the MMO Grind. I'm Malice, that's my co-host
Apuga! Apuga! Apuga!
and we'll be talking about class balancing and what that really means in the MMO space today. We've basically really going to kind of dig down into the depths of what types of class balance there is, what scope, because in the MMO space there are so many different methodologies, whether it be Trinity gameplay or where you have factions that are all have individual class types, or if you have just skill-based. All these things have different methodologies of how you balance them and how you bring them into focus for the betterment of gameplay. So, Puka.
I don't believe class balancing is possible anymore. I think everyone should give up and just embrace pay to win, guys. Like, why focus on balancing over skill when you could just balance with your credit card? Think about that. I mean, right? That's what the industry wants, right? Right?
To a point, you're not incorrect. But I feel that's more of a gear issue than a
regardless, I think it's in the successful MMOs or the MMOs that truly don't have an inch of pay to win on them. This is the next thing that players definitely cry and complain about. Is like, hey, we want our class balancing, and it's not exclusive to PvP titles or what I would say is a competitive from players fighting players. It's important to people from the standpoint of PvE as well. I think everyone ultimately wants that their class selection to stand up on its own 2 feet, and they want it to be able to have a place within the game and be needed.
Why have 3 different types of caster if really only one is the good main DPS caster and everybody else is kind of relegated to bullshit work?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that you see often, and starting off in the PvE space. I think World of Warcraft is a great example of looking at class balance. When you're putting raids together, what classes based off gear score are putting out what DPS if a person's doing a proper rotation. It's all calculable. So ultimately, when a patch happens, when devs do something, when an item exists that allows a certain class to excel, and they rise above the others, they're the choice. They're what people want. They're what's going to get first pick in the slot. Ultimately that's one of the biggest challenges as the dev is to make every class that fits that archetype have an even chance at getting that slot. Ultimately,
that was actually with this whole rise of the WoW Classic. To me, one of the greatest failings in World of Warcraft was that their class balance was garbage through Classic. And I'm curious, I haven't played it, and I'm not planning on it, but I'm curious as to how that, if they did make tweaks to the game otherwise, besides just bringing it back to the classic format, because you don't really see the viability of the druid, you don't see the viability of the paladin and things like that until you move into Burning Crusade. Yeah. Because unless you want them to be healers, and that was the worst thing that they could have ever done for the paladin, because every single paladin in the whole entire history of classic was a ret paladin.
I only played prots, sir.
Yeah.
But not a classic.
They're all running around being grand warriors for the faith and stabbing things, and then they were relegated to raids of stand in that corner and cast heal on repeat. And It's like, what? I am a knight. I am a paladin. Damn it.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid concern, especially when you think about, those 2 classes in particular, Pally and Druid, a lot of their value was that they were meant to be classes that you could, essentially, you pick a class, and it fills multiple roles. They were both classes that had a path in line that allowed them to fill both roles reliably. I'm pretty sure in Classic, Rejuvenation was not an official, viable role for Druid, though. Although from an archetype standpoint, like they wanted it, and they changed it eventually. But the point is, like, the Paladin was the example of the perfect, like, it can fill every role of the Trinity. From the developer standpoint, that's what they wanted. That's what they pitched. That's what they were selling you with the Paladin.
But what you went live as Plague State so clearly says, wrong. They weren't healers. They were just cleanse bots.
Yeah. And it, ultimately, and that's something to where, at times I feel like there's a disconnect between developers and their games. Where it's like, do you guys even play it? Have y'all sat down as an internal team of developers and actually done this raid? Because, like, I understand, like, okay, maybe organizing that is kind of difficult. Y'all are working on assets, whatever. But the point is, like, you should try your product, right? Like, this product you're producing and you're pitching, like, you've got to try it and ask yourselves, like, because if your player base is going to work these metas out, I think you should be responsible to come to those same conclusions as well, if you are truly intimately familiar with your product. And I think a lot of devs don't.
From former experience,
that's right, and they cleared every one of these. They're like, these are so easy. Warrior, priest, and mage.
The biggest problem that we ever ran into is that I worked at some over 250 people working on the product that I worked on, and that contained about 3 people who actually knew how to play. Everyone else fell into the category of what I would call, if you can't do, you teach. If you can't play,
throwing shade.
I'm throwing shade hard.
Malice, chunking shade.
Bunch of devs just don't know how to play their product. I would watch these guys try to do the raid boss content and just die on repeat. I'm like, can I get my guild in here and do this so that you can actually see if it works or not? Because we don't even know if this content works. You can't get past stage 1 of the fight, and you know exactly what it's supposed to do. Like, what?
Yeah, and I know I'm coming from a standpoint of like ridiculous ideals, right? Like, at the end of the day, these people have a job. They're artists. They're programmers. They're not necessarily gamers, and that's okay.
No, it's not.
Well, I think it is okay, because here's the deal.
I think they need a good test team.
On staff. I do believe, in this day and age, we see a lot of players lining up to fill a middle ground role that they call IT, or internal testers, where they are not paid staff, but they are definitely serve as a dedicated group of people that staff can turn to test elements. Like, these are dedicated gamers. But I definitely don't feel like, for you to be a part of gaming industry, I don't think you have to be a gamer, especially if you are a person that is passionate about your craft. And I mean, especially from a standpoint of coding and art, there are nuanced things that you can bring to this industry, even without necessarily being an avid consumer of it. Because you're passionate in your field, and I think artists.
I walk into the realm, kind of what Plague State smartly said about fucking non-Pally talking about a Pally's job. It's like, if you ain't played one, can you really make that experience? Now, don't get me wrong. You can make content, you can tell a story, you can do all those things. But, so my job was I would build out quests. I did all the quest content. And I had a writer. Well, the writer would write these great ideas, and it was great prose and all this other wonderful things. And he generally had a
story
pocket for good story, and generally understood how to write a quest. The problem is, oftentimes I would have to go back to him and have to rewrite it, because what he was describing is something I did not have physical assets to make happen in a game. And so it's like, you always, without those good gameplay safety nets, like, how do you really make the best game if you're not at least a decent game?
Again, I think we're kind of getting into the weeds from organization, but again, I think a person in a managerial role that fills the in between of those two I mean, that's where, leads exist, and that's
Right.
where people that have elements like, again, you might have an artist that's like a master in their field. Like, you understand, like you've not
Oh,
seen
yeah.
you've not seen line work like this person can put down,
Oh,
and
yeah.
this person's never picked up a controller in their life. That doesn't mean you don't want this person
Well,
on your team making
you're
wonderful
correct.
assets.
I would say art is a different story.
But I'd say the
Whereas,
same for writing to a certain extent. But yes, you have to have someone
yeah,
in place that's like, hey, awesome story that's written. But let's break it. Let
right,
me explain to you from the programmer standpoint. Like, these are the constraints they're dealing with. Let's work
right,
your story around that. And and that's
right.
again, that's what a lead's responsibility is. I will say, from if you are a person on staff that is directly responsible for balancing, I think it is imperative that you are an avid consumer of the title you are balancing. I
I
think that is
also,
extremely imperative rather. Sorry.
from my experience in the industry and from a lot of the people that I am connected to that have experience in the industry, I will say that one of the weirdest flaws that affects the MMO space, and I assume it affects all levels of different games, is that the closer you get to the point of character balance and the actual nitty gritty, that what's the glue that holds that game together,
Mm-hmm.
is the zone most polluted by office politics. It
Really?
is
Okay.
where you have the most chiefs and not enough Indians getting it done.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that's all titles, but I feel that is one of the key aspects of why a lot of the titles that we've seen probably in the last 15 years have failed, is because the thing that they needed to basically find an expert to work on were the most nitpicked, oversighted things that ended up being voted by committee on repeat until it was just garbage.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's definitely an interesting point of view and insight there. Where you just think
But I love you all, devs. I really, really am not
well,
mad at you all. But sometimes bad things need to be said so they can get better.
well, again, I definitely I like to think that the people at the end of the day designing a lot of these systems have walked a similar path to myself as far as walking through different MMO titles. And again, I think it's quite obvious. We've had meta mentioned before. I think meta is easy to find in almost any title, right? I think ultimately what would be a meta for a job or a role is easy to discover with a simple Google in a title, where a lot of people bring the kind of the same idea together. They're all sharing data, and it finds itself. And as a dev, I think it's important for you to be, or as a dev responsible for balancing, I think it's important for you to be very intimately familiar with the current states of metas in your title, and in previous titles that have failed. But yeah, just in general, like you need to be familiar with that, and then ask yourself why, and then ask yourself, is this good? Is this healthy? Because some metas are just plain okay. There's a reason they're there, but you also have to ask yourself, is this really what the players want? How are the players receptive in general of this quote unquote meta?
There becomes a slight problem in that situation too. Is what do players want versus what do players need, and oftentimes they're not the same thing. For instance, no one wants. You're not going to find a player who's like, I am complete support of flavor of the month class, right? There's no.
No,
I
I don't think anyone
really
likes it.
say that.
You're right.
But
You're right.
but it is done on a specific desire to keep people repeating content and replaying the game to continue to get people more and more connected and more Pavlovianly addicted to the game.
Correct.
So, and at the end of the day, that makes the player like if you want to use that word, the game more, and therefore they hate the idea. But
I don't know if it makes it like it more, but it does cause them to play it in order to keep up more.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the problem, right? So when you have a constantly shifting meta, if you will, a lot of players can potentially get burnt out if it shifts too quickly, especially when they invest large amount of times competing, or what would be not competing, working towards establishing their character to fit into what is that agreed upon meta. And then they work hard to achieve that, and then you as developers shift it to keep people interested. Does that make sense? I think that can cause a lot of players to burn out.
Stuff get deleted.
What's that now?
Oh, I'm trying to figure out why. Because Plague State actually had made a bunch of really interesting questions, and the bot or you or somebody deleted.
That's not me, man.
Deleted all of his messages. I was trying to figure out why.
Ooh, oh yeah, I don't know.
Because
Plague State, you've just been handled. I
was about to be like, no, that's.
Oh man. I'll reiterate because I can see the historical chat. So Plague State said Guild Wars 2 had it figured out. All factions same class, and most were pretty balanced. They then replied, the hard thing to balance is stealth, which is a great point. And pets, yeah.
Yep.
Class of the month, how they make you buy character slots in Cash Shop. I think that was a Guild Wars 2 reference there. Then a whole bunch of dollar signs. Plague said it was a dollar sign. She spammed some symbols, and Streamlabs did not like those symbols. Plague State. That was it. Yeah, no dollar signs. You can't do it. Wow. You got to limit that to $2 signs. Double money. Double money. $3 signs, and you're out of here. You know?
Is the cash grab. Don't like the cash grab.
Yeah, Zayla doesn't like people to get out of hand in chat. Y'all better keep it toned down. You understand?
But I think the comment of Guild Wars 2, though, brings up an interesting aspect of kind of where I was talking about is here's a game that actually figured it out, and the problem is that it figured it out.
Oh, well, so...
And when it figured it out, it collapsed in on itself because it got boring.
Yeah, so here's my take on Guild Wars. I think Guild Wars... So we can all agree Guild Wars had a horizontal progression, right? Ultimately, within weeks, like when the game went live, whatever, it had its progression. Then after a while, it's like, hey, everyone's got exotic gear. We're cool.
Right.
And I commend them for releasing Ascended. That was awesome, and I commend them for the way they rolled it out. I thought that was very well done. Jewelry first, then a couple weapons, and then we started seeing armor, and then then it was here you go. There you go. And it was essentially
only get about a 5 to 10%.
Well, it was 13. So every tier was exactly. So if you had a complete set of gear of the same stat, every tiered color jump was exactly 13%. I do believe, if someone wants to fact check me, please. But I think it was 13%.
10%, but 13 and 10% irrelevant.
It's pretty negligible from a one-on-one standpoint.
Right. It does. Skill easily outbeats
absolutely
10%.
Skill and the rock paper scissors of class. Yep. But so what they did though, and again, my familiarity, I did not get involved in the PvP, the SPvP scene, but I lived in World versus World.
Right, me too.
And so my balancing familiarity is built around that, and so they were a team that. Obviously, I wouldn't say necessarily had a lot of members that participated in World vs. World. You see the EdNet tag out there every now and then. But they weren't playing for work. They were playing for fun because they enjoyed their game. Regardless, they definitely listened to feedback. And, they eventually kind of heard the plea of some classes that were lesser played. And they always constantly had this shift, which it was okay in Guild Wars 2 because essentially horizontal progression. The problem came in because eventually, like me with Guild Wars 2, I had every class, every class, and I had unimaginable amounts of gear sets for every single class. I think everyone did. So no matter what the meta was, I could whip up the gear set and let's go. And I wasn't a rarity in Guild Wars 2. Now, I had plenty of members that ran with us, and they didn't, and we spent hours and hours and hours constructing builds that were good enough, right? Like, they met the, like, minimum requirements is what we had. And if something changed, just hours and hours and hours, yeah. If something changed, we're like, listen, it's okay. We'll work it out a little bit. You're not having to change your gear. Because we had players that, like, listen, they log, 5 hours a week, maybe, And they're running competitive WW with us, So, but you got to have a build that works for them. And so, yeah, poor man builds is what we call them. We had top shelf and we had poor for every role. Oh, yeah. We had a role. And we had poor and top shelf. The nice thing is
you could slam someone into a set of exotics in a week without, like, even blinking.
Oh, yeah. And it was imperative. We wanted them to be able to get the pack of whatever exotic, or we'd whip it up. And again, I commend Guild Wars for that. What I definitely believe is they, I guess what they were trying to do is they would look and be like, what classes aren't people playing in WW? And be like, the biggest one in recent memory was the engineer change. Like, this was like, it blew people's mind. And they were like, what classes aren't people playing in WW? And they were like, engineer. And this is post scrapper. And they're like, all right, no one's still playing engineer. People doing 1v1s, maybe, but really they're just playing Mesmer. And then, yeah, like, they're like, they made some changes. Like, we're looking through them, and we had a guild member. There's like, I'm gonna main heal on my Engie. We're like, what are you talking about? You're not gonna main heal on your Engie. He's like, no, I've done the numbers. I can do it.
Was this after the first expansion, or
no? This was it's probably been 8 months back. I don't know when the Engie healer. Really? I don't know when the Engie healer happened. Okay. But like, he called it a month before the meta. He's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, and he did it, and it was like, this works. And this is how everyone and their grandmother was a guardian healer. Or a firebrand healer, and it's like, you beat it into the dirt. If you don't have 2 firebrands per group, you're garbage. It's like 2 firebrands. Bring your warrior, whoever for damage. We don't care. It's like it doesn't matter. But if you got that, it's like you're good. You're unkillable. And then they nerf them not into the dirt, but they're just like, they can't fill all the roles. There you go, Gaspar, Scourge, whatever. But yeah, there's been this shift, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like, here comes healer Engie with the med kit. Like, the med kit, it was, but it worked.
Honestly, though, I was always wondering why, for the tricks that it had, why they weren't more healer oriented.
You and everyone else, So we had a guild member that only played. That's all he bring. We're like, don't you want to bring something useful? He's like, nah, I'm good. I got my engineer. It's like, this is awesome. I can do whatever I want. Doing his little rocket boots.
Players like that as well.
Just like,
you make it work, especially
correct.
When you drop
like, they're here.
Fun people, you're like,
yeah, they're here having fun. Like, more power to them, buddy. Like, it was always, before we'd initiate, he would always rocket jump into the fight. We're like, well, I wasn't going, so you're dead now. Like, you can watch videos, and his name was Cullion. He'd always just shoot off into the middle of the fight. We're like, I wasn't ready to go. Eagles, we're talking about GW2 at the
Guild
moment.
Wars 2.
Yeah, and it was just like, man. but he loved his engineer. And, but that's a great example of, like, he was playing a class and he stuck with a class that really was just such a niche role. Like, you could skirmish and that was it, and that's all this class did. And then through balancing, they put it in part of the Trinity, for crying out loud. Like, this is now,
which is funny, considering Guild Wars 2 originally, as its concept, was a non-Trinity game. Correct. They had no healers. It was everyone had self heals.
You all got a little something.
You had your about the only healer that existed for the longest time was the staff guardian.
Yeah,
just doing a little focus and a few hots out there, and that was about it. And that was the that was actually a lot of fun. The problem is that as their design model is around access. It was all about the Zerg. That was what the game was designed to do. Trust me, I've sat there with the lead producer begging for content for smaller groups, and he's like, "That's a really neat idea. Unfortunately, our design document says we are only designing for the Zerg," and that was it.
And it's so, and I can get into a rabbit's hole of so many things they could have done right in WW. And I don't think that's really the point of what we're talking about. But it is a big disappointment that ultimately the gameplay was conducive and supportive of everybody just get together and run circles around the map. I mean, we had Karma Train Friday, for crying out loud. Everyone did it on every server. Karma Train Friday, baby. Choo choo. Let's run. Like, we purposely dodged fights. I remember running by and we would all wave at the enemy as we ran the opposite direction.
Take the keep I just took.
Go take it. Go get it, guys. And it's like they could have shut that down at any time. And it was just, why? Why that was allowed to happen?
They had a mechanic that kind of played with that early on, which was that like the Powerball thing that was at the top of the map.
Again, that was a Dark Age mechanic.
Right, but it got bugged so bad, and they never could figure out how to fix it that they just took it out of the game. And it was like, maybe you should fix that instead.
Yeah.
You know?
The Powerball mechanic was great, but the reality of the Powerball is, again, back to balancing. It was, again, now a server would just get all three of them. Like, this server's hitting 15% harder, and you're like, well, that's life, y'all. There was never... Yeah, there was never an incentive, or there was not an incentive. There was never a hand up to the underdog, and there's got to be a hand up. And I know a lot of games do that in forms of incentives. In other words, getting more players out there, further incentivizing them with more XP, more access to money. You talk about something like Camelot Unchained, and they've discussed this, and they've said, well, ultimately, there is a NPC run realm, right? Like the king is an NPC of each realm, and basically where the NPCs ultimately see a weakness coming from the player base, a artificial incentive will be given to the players who fill that hole, right? And that comes from, and lots of other things, that comes from a standpoint of the economy, but it also comes from a standpoint of defending the realm. As they creep closer, the incentives to go out there and fight back are going to increase. The rewards for going out there and killing other people are going to increase. They've got to incentivize player. And I think, this is speculation, but I think also there will be kind of a buff. Like the king will buff players to give you a one-up on these people, to help push them out a little.
That's what Dark Age of Camelot did so well, which was you got the relics, you got buffed, but it cost you because it weakened your NPCs. Your Correct. NPC army did not defend as well, so that meant it opened you more up to midnight raids.
And the buffers showed up. If they were at your gates, the NPC buffers showed up outside of your your border forts, and you could talk to them, and they were like, "What's up, son? Go get them! Like you got some sweet buffs." And it was like having an NPC buff bot sitting right there ready to go, and he only arrived when your realm was in need of it. And that was like an ingenious idea. Like, help them out. And it's those little things that just, they really turn the tide. And they really do. That combined with incentives to get out there and do it, more rewards, it gets players going, and it helps bring that balance back. Because that's what you always want. You want that push, and you want it right there. And sometimes you come a little too far, but then you're like, let's fight back with an incentive. And then that dies off.
Yeah, so we've definitely touched on the larger scope of balance from a 30,000-foot view, but let's kind of delve into some of the things that Plague State was talking about, which is some of those really hard nuts to crack. First of all, stealth or no stealth in the game.
That is an interesting nut to crack. I think ultimately, based off the titles I have played and the enjoyment received from those titles, I am a advocate and I agree that permanent stealth should be an option in a game. That's just me. I've played titles with it. I've seen it balanced. And again, I'll use Dark Age as an example. I think they were a game that did permanent stealth right. Listen, if you were permanent stealth, you know what it felt like. I think it was done right. Listen, the movement speed was atrocious. But you could get there if you wanted to. You had to stay in the woods.
You got a free kill.
Not okay. If you were a scout, yes. Like if you were a scout, absolutely. But as a HIB,
you're an infiltrator or any of the assassin
no, bump that mess. As a HIB player, it was hard to get a free kill. Oh, if you picked your target,
as long as you don't hit the tank,
if you
will kill anybody.
You're correct. If you pick your target, listen. As a mana enchanter that I played, I mean that was my main during live. If I was out of position, I knew they were there waiting for me. It was a fear. It was, listen, we're set up. When we set up our siege, you set up your barrier, and you had your support classes on the edges. You had your eyes on your edges. You had your rangers there. They were your eyes. They had the increased radius of detection. They were positioned there to keep your core safe. Like, that was just a strategy. If you didn't do that properly, stealth was able to come in there and pick you off. And I think I like that aspect of the game. And I think I think there exists patient players that want to sit there and they want to stalk. And that's a gameplay that allowing for stealth where, listen, they get a kill every 10 minutes, maybe. Right?
That's fine.
Yeah.
But the guy that they kill, was he having fun? And that's the issue.
So here's the thing. Was he having fun? I don't know. Was he out of position? Was he out of position? Maybe.
He doesn't care that he was out of position. He spent the next 10 minutes screaming in public channels about how some bullshit that he got one shot. He could cast 12 spells and not kill somebody.
Well, so here's the thing: is I don't know that necessarily stealth can bind with the ability to perma-stun from an initiate is the right method. But I do think stealth from a gameplay standpoint of positioning, scouting, moving, is viable. And I think it is important to allow a person to stand hidden. I think if someone wants to run circles, a wide circle real quick to let's scout for some stealth, I think those stealthers need to be scared. They'll be like, and they're trying to get away, but they can't because they're slow. And if they break stealth to get that speed, like, that's a negative, like, boom, the jig is up, you're spotted. I think it's important for them to be able to move slowly, creep through the shadows, and just be those eyes. And if someone is caught out of position, if they roll the dice and maybe they're like, I can get that scout, that ranger running around, maybe I can take it. Maybe I can't. And they roll that dice, like that's their gameplay style. It's not a gameplay style that works for me.
I'm more looking at it from I've played both sides, and obviously I'm in a position of power. I have the absolute ability to not be seen, and I can then absolutely kill you. So I'm in a position of power. It's more of how does that interact with the grand scheme of other people's fun.
So and I think from
Dark Age as one example is that when you talk about being out of position, that was less ever a concern. The biggest concerns you ever had was, so I died and had to release. I want to catch up back to my party. I've got to run across the bridge.
You're
damn, I'm never going to cross the bridge because there are 12 stealthers just licking their blades going, let's get them.
Listen, you are very correct. And what, again, I've been in those shoes. I knew they were there, and I didn't go across the bridge. I was like, no, I'm not going across the bridge. Look at this random spot in the river. That's where I'm crossing, sucker. I'm going to dive down, too, while I'm there. I'm going to swim underwater so you don't see my nameplate. I'm going to get up. Like, I was playing the game. I'm like, that's what I wanted. Like, I didn't like it as a player, but I appreciate the fear that I felt because those players were there. And I think that is an important aspect of gameplay is you as a player being able to provide that fear. But at the same time, for the most part, you're not doing anything for a lot of the times. You're that element, you're that unseen element of fear. It doesn't work for a lot of people. And I will comment on what PlayState's saying. I completely agree that I do not believe you should be able to vanish back. Like, once you've initiated, breaking off from combat has got to be more difficult for stealthers. I've not seen breaking off from combat done right.
Here's the rant. Guild Wars 2 Thieves. They were just blinking. That's all they did. Look, I'm here. Look, I'm not here. Look, I'm here. Look, I'm not here. Look, I'm here. Look, I'm not here. You can't target them. You can't do anything. They never die. They probably won't kill you, but you can't ignore them because then they will kill somebody. And they can lock down 5 people to waste your time because you can't do anything about it. And they can't do anything about you, but they can make sure that you have to pay attention to them. It's like the biggest drama queen in the world. Look, pay attention to me.
Well, now I will say, as a person that has dealt with these people as a driver too, it can be frustrating. There are ways of working around it. It requires bundling up. It requires setting a trap sometimes for this stealther. But I mean, I would argue that Mesmers are almost just as bad too, as far as picking off your tail. But yeah, I'm not a humongous fan of how the Guild Wars 2 stealther work. I'm not a humongous fan of that re-entering stealth in combat. But
or if you do have a re-enter in stealth, it needs to be like Dark Age. You can't attack for the
silhouette.
15 seconds or whatever that. You're locked out from doing anything. It's an escape. It's not immediate re-stealth and big power move again. You know.
Yeah, but the problem with Guild Wars 2 stealth is it was invisibility, not stealth, right? So every other game, if you go into stealth and you're within a player's detection radius, there's a silhouette. They can still see you, right? If you're stealth in Dark Age Camelot, or Guild Wars 2, you walk right under their feet. You're stealth, and then you dodge, and you're an iframe right through their feet. They're like, they're swinging, and they can't hit you. Like, that's not cool. And I think everyone agrees that is not cool. I'm cool with you went stealth, but I can still find you, right? Like, if I was a Nightshade and I'm like, all right, I'm out of here, and I sprint, and then go stealth, like, you saw where I went stealth. You could walk over there and get me, you know, and you could re-engage, and I'm at a disadvantage. I already wanted to run. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. At the moment, I am still an advocate for perma-stealth in games. I'm again, you know, the next title I think that's really going to look at it. Well, so we have like Arcade that we're going into, a lot of us, and it's Arcade Unchained. They no longer have perma-stealth, whereas when we played it at live, they did. You know, right now the timer starts, like, you got a 60-second or a 30-second window when you hit stealth, and then there's the cooldown timer that starts when you come out of stealth, and you just got to figure out what you're doing between then, you know, which is not the case, or wasn't also the case at live.
I do like systems. See, I'm against perma-stealth, just because you can make a system that gives them enough time. Arcade is a good example of that, where they have a lot of time in stealth to get into position and do what they need to do, but they can't stand around there forever. The same answer is like in Warhammer, they had it started eating your resource bar. So you would start losing power. So you didn't have as many combos when you came out because you didn't have the juju to do it anymore.
And I think, again, you know, talking from Camelot Unchained, based off the design or what I'm understanding with stealth, it's just like it does appear that there will not be permanent stealth. And I think a lot of people are okay with that. You know, there will be elongated stealth, but it will eventually have a toll on your character. That's, you know, the veil walking. You know, walking in a plane of existence that you don't belong puts a toll on your character.
There is stealth and there's veil walking. They're two different things.
Oh, are they?
Yes.
My understanding is that the veil walking was the stealth.
Everyone gets a class that is can walk in the veil, and then one that is just a rogue that can.
Okay,
stealth.
So you're differentiating between the scout and the stealther.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. Yeah. And I think that scout is going to fill the role that I appreciate that stealthers were allowed to fill, which is that the eyes that you can never really touch, but they also can't do much. They're just eyes,
right?
Effectively,
And
they don't have
right. Information is its own power.
Yeah.
Assassination is a little bit of a different conversation. I also will say that something that I thought Dark Age did really well, which was the idea of climb points, allowing assassin classes to climb walls and get into keeps and attack people on the walls. Now that was cool.
It was awesome.
And then they decided to give that to warriors. And then my troll was going up the sides and keep going, I'm coming for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was probably a slightly foolish mistake.
Yep. Yeah, that was the whole point, was like, it was an element of gameplay for these classes that otherwise could not engage upon that bundle in the siege, right? And so it was like, here's an element of gameplay for you, and that element is called Infiltration. You can do it, and there's counter infiltration too. You know, they were 100% waiting at the top of every climb point, like, I see you.
Literally another assassin. Perf right up.
Yeah, they were like, I see you. And it was that was the meta, so it was always a risk. And you got there, and you were like, nope, going down. I'll try another one.
Back one or whatever like that wasn't on the face of the siege, so that was
but I guess the point I'm getting at is I appreciate that element of gameplay that was able to happen in the whole overarching siege, right? That was a little mini part of the siege where if each side didn't have components in place to handle that element of gameplay, like, they could turn the side of a siege. If infiltrators were allowed to freely access the walls and you didn't have counter infiltrators in place, like, you will lose this battle. So it was a nice element, and it was a nice piece of gameplay that I think a certain type of player likes to participate in. And I want that to be available to people that appreciate that type of gameplay.
That walks us into another aspect of that you hear regularly complained, and is the continued banding back and forth, and we did it here in this conversation, is the scaling in and out to determine what is balanced. Because in an MMO, you have the ability to have a one-on-one fight, a group fight, or a Zerg fight. And all those aspects have different value and mechanics per class. Arcage is a perfect example of it. I will say that one of the best reads I did before that game even came out is someone actually put a document together that listed all the classes and then what they excelled at. Water fighting, siege fighting, large Zerg fighting, small man battles, one-on-one combat. And therefore, you got to pick the classes that were balanced for what you wanted to do, as opposed to going, well, I'm just good at everything, because nothing was good at everything.
Sorry, I'm reading the chat. I think all classes gain permanent stealth, even in combat. Yeah. That's awesome. Yes, I completely agree.
That in WoW with phasing.
Yeah, like corpses just appear, and you're like, we got him! That was like Guild Wars 2 back in the early, or like the days of SMC fighting. SMC fighting, you're like, bomb the choke! I know they're there! Yeah, we can't see them, but they're there! And you just wait for the corpses to appear. You're like, yeah, we got them! Go play Guild Wars 2 4 years ago. You'll get exactly what you want, Narthesis. Everyone was invisible.
Oh, yeah, he was running with us in that.
Oh, that was awesome. What a great... yeah, back to your comment. That's a tricky one. It really is.
And should you balance for small...
So ultimately, I think this is best done through builds. And allowing the player, not classes. Personally, I think classes need to be viable in every aspect of gameplay. That is a permanent choice you make at character selection when you build a character. And you do not need to create a character for a certain gameplay style, right? Like, you need to be allowed to change your character dynamically based off what you want to do in the game. And as a new player entering a game, you don't...
Classes are builds.
Well, correct, right? And so that's the thing, is I think Arcade does a great job at that. Is the only thing you're really locked into is your gear. Like that's what you put your time into. That's what you put your investment into. And so
Probably
these
focus on melee.
stats,
Your gear is melee oriented.
yeah. So these stats can now be, I can combo them with abilities to fit a specific type of gameplay. And so if you're like, hey guys, we're going sailing, and I'm like, okay, well, I can pick this ability, this ability, this ability, this ability. Those will give me a distinct advantage over water because they're gap closers, and I don't have to worry about swimming. And here's some hard CC because, that's excellent. And here's like AoE. Yeah, well, sure. And it's like, but you could take these choices and you pick these up and you gear them for a certain fight and you build for the activity you're about to take place in. And I think that's important to be able to do in any game. And I think, and this is this is a red flag for me potentially with Camelot Unchained, where I feel like there's a possibility you might be forced to like become too invested in a play style and have to spend time and effort working your character towards being viable in another play style. Now, hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully the skill builder system.
I mean that in a greater sense. Like more specifically, what do you mean?
Well, okay. So, talking about how they plan on progressing your capabilities with different abilities, right? And so, if let's just talk very generically, like, and I'll roll back to like Camelot or Dark Age Camelot. Let's say, like, I really invested my character into being able to use powerful point blank area of attack spells, right? And I put a lot of time into that, and my character really excels in that, and that's what they're great at. And I have my bar set up like that, and that's fine. If I want to be allowed to also, and that's where it's like I don't know how progression is going to work there, but I want to be like, all right, well, I want to do some one-on-one stuff. A big point blank area of attack that's made to hit 15 people at the same time is not really conducive to a one-on-one fight. Do I now also have to really grind up and excel with the base elements of a skill in order to be competent with, let's say, some single target abilities?
Well, you're always gonna specifically if we're talking Arcade.
I'm talking Camelot Unchained, not Arcade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was talking Camelot Unchained.
Okay, for Camelot
no, Arcade just like, hey man, there's the abilities. Unlock them. You can change them when you want. Right. Yeah, they got a great system for that already in place. You're like, hey, we're going to go do Halcyona. You know what you need to bring. All right.
Well, I think the thing that in Camelot Unchained that you're going to be able to do that is going to be kind of above and beyond is the fact that you get to make your own spells and make your own abilities.
Correct.
That is when you're going to be able to go, okay, let me step back and tweak out something that can do this. So I may only have a hotbar that has my AoE abilities for this gameplay, but that doesn't mean I didn't also build a couple of useful single target spells that I keep on.
And so ultimately my question, and again, this is something that, we're speaking in hypothetical.
Right, because we don't know.
And we don't have any information, so understand that. But ultimately, my question is, from a progression standpoint, what the pieces of the abilities, will I be able to progress my effectiveness with the point-blank area of effect piece, or will I be progressing my effectiveness with the earth magic piece? And no matter what, if I have a certain amount of skill with earth magic, no matter how I modify my ability to use earth magic and all the other pieces that come with earth magic, my base earth magic skill applies to all that. I think if like that's how they're going to work it, I think we're free and clear. But I think if they're like,
as you level that up, it just gives you more points to spend and unlock new ways of modifying it. So like, I can now make bigger AoEs. Or
it's more pieces for your creation. Because you make every ability. You make it like a little biscuit. You're like, I want to put this much baking powder, this much salt. Like, that's too much salt. Let's put some sugar. Like, you make every ability. And I think that's awesome. But, again, I don't want to have to progress the little pieces. I would like to, just be given options, which I think maybe. It's all hypothetical. I don't know. But...
So, Plague State, you think that Arcade should have taken a step even farther and allowed people to just kind of re-roll their gear? so they could go from archery to caster to healer. I'm, I feel that there does become a point where the motivation in the game to keep playing the game outside of fighting PvP is going to, you want that drive. So you want to reroll to an archer or something like that, you're going to have to go build another gear set. So now you're going to go do more PvE to get there.
I don't know, Mouse. I'm going to talk specifically from the point of Arcage, and I'm going to say with Arcage, when you pick your gear and you start progressing it, if you change your mind 2 months down the road, you're starting over from square one. I believe that's just the nature. Now, every time you tier up your gear, obviously you can move some stats around, and maybe that'll play into your choice of like, okay, well, I'm about to tier up
stones and things like that, and always re-roll Hiram gear and things like that.
Yeah, and so that's a way of doing it, but ultimately, like, it's a costly decision to make, and I'm okay with that. I am a big advocate of the D&D style character progression in MMOs. I think they are meant to be long-time investments. And so ultimately, if I want to drastically change my play style, I ought to make another character. And I am okay with that. 240
possible classes that you are only pigeonholed really into melee, caster, or healer, or archer. Sure. Outside of that, those four things, you could slap all kinds of different flavor.
There's all different ways of going about it, and I think so. Ultimately,
20 viable classes within.
Yeah, and so ultimately, I think a character, you're essentially just locking yourself into an archetype, and that's definitely good enough for me. Because I'm a person that I personally in MMOs, I would love to see stat allocation at character creation. I would love to see that, and I would love to. I mean, that was an important part of one of my favorite MMOs, where all you really had to do was you just went plus on intellect. Like, I'm gonna get it.
I believe that if you're going to do this is what I find to be the problem in that, is not the actual thing itself, but the lack of tutorial to walk you into that first. Because oh my god, did I walk into Dark Age of Camelot and then 3 weeks later throw my character away because my stat allocations were garbage because I was like, I don't do enough damage. I felt that I had to get this. And then later on in the game, you can't... Oh, God.
It is a very big problem. And it is a problem when it comes to min-maxers and people that want to build a character to be a meta, to conform to a meta. And they... Like, I've got members...
In an MMO. I mean, I guess I look at it from the standpoint of you're either PvPing or you're raiding. I mean, unless you're a role player, then that's a different conversation.
No, but when I say min-maxing,
looking against the game, you want to be able to be like, okay, well, I do the most damage as a caster. That's my role in this raid, or that's my role in this PvP match. So I feel that kind of on that level, everyone should min-max.
Well, correct. And that's the thing, is a lot of people, if they don't have enough information, they get... it's almost like I have members of my guild that like they can't even progress. They're like, I can't make my character. You're like, why? It's because I don't want to screw up. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I'll use Dark Age for an example. It's like, do I put all my points into Dex or do I put all my points into Int for a spellcaster? You're like, what do you mean? Just pick one. It's like, no. What's the best? Do I get more spells off that deal less damage, or do I do less spells, less cast speed, but they all hit harder? I don't know what the best is.
Or do I split it and make some type of balance?
Or do I split it and I'm just garbage at both? What do I do? Like, and it's, again, like, I've got people that this cripples.
My scout, when I first made it, because archery required you to carry arrows, I actually had to take some points in strength so that I could actually haul arrows, so I wouldn't run out of arrows every 9 seconds.
Well, that's because your stupid self had to carry a shield, too. You better believe it. Stupid shield. Who gives shields to an archer? It just, pow. Hey, you're mine for 9 seconds. Have you seen this? Rapid fire. Rapid fire. Rapid fire. Rapid fire. Oh, we're only halfway done. Rapid fire. Rapid fire.
At me, block, block, block.
Gosh. Oh, you're the worst. You're the worst person. I hated scouts.
Serious scout sniper.
I hated scouts.
Back when in Dark Age, when sitting made you take double damage, and all the casters had to sit to get mana back.
That's me. I was in the back.
Shut up.
I was in the back by the power font. I was like, gotta get stronger. Gotta get my mana back. I've used it all. We're gonna go in a big fight. And I was like, I'll just sit here. Smack. What's happening? What's happening? No, no, dead. It was just like, oh my gosh.
Here's another one that Plaguestead had brought up, which is pets. So,
yeah,
we have seen pets done many times in games. They've tried to give us flexibility. Of course, min-maxing proved that no matter how awesome and cool flavored you give pets, people will all camp the one cat in WoW to have the fastest double attack.
Bump that mess. It wasn't the cat. They wanted the bat from Zolgarub.
Oh, the
bat. Remember the bat?
The silence bat?
Well, yeah, and it would chase you down. You could sick that sucker, and it would catch people on mounts. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that was the thing.
Yeah, well, that cat though did double speed attacks for full damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, so you have a game like that where actually you have pets that are pretty meaningful. I mean, you have a bear pet. He can really tank. He can actually like hold aggro and do some good shit. Mm-hmm. But then you look at a game like Guild Wars 2 where. Why are you playing a ranger? Just put your pet away. That's the stupidest waste of anything ever.
Put it away. Put it away.
Yeah. Because all you're doing is creating a little thing that'll just people can follow us because it's gonna lag behind when we're running along.
So here's the deal, and here's my short opinion, abridged opinion on pets.
Okay.
In my personal opinion, I think Warhammer did pets right. I think those pets were okay, and I think they were relatively well balanced. That was in Battlegrounds, not large-scale PvP. I will say I think they were well-balanced in that. I do not know the role they play in large-scale PvP. I think it's pretty difficult. I think...
in Warhammer?
Well, again, it's like, in my opinion, they are much...
Two pet classes. There was the Chaos Archer, the Goblin Archer, and then there was the White Lion.
Yeah.
And I'll actually go into that in a second. Continue what you were saying.
Again,
say about the White Lion.
Yeah, so I think they always fill that skirmisher role, and I think they do it very well where that AI... In other words, the one thing that's predictable about the AI element of that pet is to the best of the computer's ability, it's going to stay with your target and do consistent damage. And that is an important element.
Irrelevant damage, though.
Well, you are very correct. Well, you are very correct, and that's why, like for example, Guild Wars 2, irrelevant damage. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to talk about.
So as an extreme point on balancing, so Mark Jacobs, the guy who runs City State, who ran Mythic Online Entertainment, Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer, and the creator of Camelot Unchained. We've been talking a lot about his products in general. One thing he has always done is he's always tried to make each faction feel very individual and very unique. Though it may clone abilities, like you could find that spell somewhere in the enemy. It won't always be in the same spot. It won't be from the same class type, but it's always there. So what they did in Warhammer is they created the Marauder. And the Marauder could do a tentacle pull. He could lash out a big energy tentacle, yank you across the battlefield, and smoke your bags. Mm-hmm. That is what the White Lion also did. The problem is, this is where an idea does not meet a balanced end result, which is When I do it as a marauder, you can do nothing about it. When I do it as a white lion, I just keep shooting your pet until it's dead before it ever gets to me. It's like defeating your spell before it ever gets to me. And therefore, they were never equal in that value. Fetch had the other value, which was that pet would chase you beyond its range and then could fetch you, so it might throw you farther. But at the end of the day, again, I could just pull back and kite, and I would kill the pet and wouldn't get fetched. So I feel that like there is the idea that we have equal abilities, yet the end result is that it's a complete imbalance.
Well, and you're definitely correct in that regard. And let's be honest, Squig Herder was a better pet class. It was such a better pet class.
What Plague Snake's talking about is we did X's and O's. Everybody was a goblin. We all had X's and O's in our name, and we would just go into the battlegrounds, all as Squig Herders, and we would we'd call a target, and then 6 squigs would just rush.
Those things were relentless, man. They did not care. They were awesome. And I will say, and I think Gaspar said it earlier, is it's like, again, you are bringing an NPC into what is supposed to be a player versus player fight. And I will definitely concede that, yes, you are gimping the player that chooses the pet class. You are gimping them by the amount that is the predictability of the NPC nature of that pet. Because ultimately, when it comes to PvP...
One or the other. Because I've never seen them actually do it right yet. I haven't actually met the proper permanent pet class. They're either the pet is so weak or the pet is so strong that...
Yeah, and again, I might have been looking through at Warhammer with like rose-colored glasses. I was definitely more referencing Squig Herder because I thought Squig Herder was a pretty cool... Like, once they got to you, you didn't have a lot of options, right? You were reliant on tying them up with that and then keeping yourself away, much like a WoW hunter. You were very much reliant on that. Like, if they got there, what were you going to do? Raptor Strike? And so it was... I think in a PvP element, ultimately, I think for the foreseeable future, so long as the pets are at some level AI driven, I mean, you can't play two things at once. Ultimately, yeah, it's going to be a disadvantage, or they'll just be overpowered, like you say, because they'll try to overcompensate for the AI element. Now, that said, I would...
From Dark Age of Camelot?
Okay, that was... So let's talk about... Well, let's talk about that, because that is an element of, and it's something I'm interested to see with Camelot Unchained. That was more of your spell acted like a pet, right? So your spell was a pet. And that was like, hey, I cast this spell. You have the ability to make if you intelligently counter it by killing it, you make my spell pretty nullified. But if you're tied up doing other things, the scale of the effectiveness of my spell, based off your willingness to ignore it, increases. And I love that. I love that.
You cast through that pet, and then that pet would do your actions for you, because you were immune to all damage while your pet was in existence.
Correct. And this pet...
You just kind of drove around behind your pet, and that pet would just jump into... But, yeah, it was kind of fragile sometimes, but...
They were deadly one-on-one, man. I ran from them.
Wow. Stay alive.
Dude, I ran from them. I saw the big one and his 4 little hooligans running. I was like, heck no. I don't want that problem. I don't remember a time or a class where I was like, I cannot think of a single class where I was like, I'm going to take this guy on. And maybe that was an element of a little bit of overpowered one-on-one. That said, that scaled in large play where it did not feel super overpowered. There were too many abilities flying and almost it felt underpowered.
Correct.
because your pet was like, it's just going to get run over because you didn't have that granular control.
Well, you didn't have the granular control, and it's just in those in that model, it was harder to heal. So it was harder for your clerics and things like that to heal you,
Couldn't target it.
and that end result was you died in AOE fields.
Yeah.
Basically, because all the AOE fields were just going off, and your pet melted, and you died.
Yeah, and again, you know, I know a lot of us are looking forward to Camelot Unchained, and I'm interested to see how they handle their proposed pet classes and those classes that seem to allow you to momentarily attack with the aspect of whatever that pet is. But it does not, I mean, it is not a long standing, it's not, hey, I summon my pet and he's here forever. It's like you bring this aspect to life for a moment, it accomplishes a short goal, and then it fizzles out or returns
more like,
into you.
Theurges from Dark Age, where it's a spell manifested as a temporary pet.
Yeah, and that skeleton's going to run and punch.
Right. That's probably the best use of pets I've ever experienced in a game is the Theurgist. They were powerful, yet it ran into, like you said, the limitations of pathing, the limitations of AI, everything like that, but it was still a manifested spell, and it would run its course and then die. And it was only 10, 20 seconds. It wasn't
and that's why I think keeping them like one of the pets is, I think, like the TDD has like a Spectre Wolf or something. They could, from a lore standpoint, allow that to path like any other spell, right? So allow that to path to a target like any other homing spell. But it just takes on the aspect of like, hey, this spell showed up and it bit you in the butt. And it's like, yeah, that's a pet class. And so I think it's more of a cosmetic thing than a mechanic thing. And I think if pet classes stay like that, cosmetic over mechanical, I think that might be finding the right place where pet classes can exist. Where every spell your character does is based around this pet that serves your character.
Arcage is an interesting example of, as we know, that it is very open-ended. It allows you to slapdash all different abilities together to make up to 240 classes, I think, with the new path that's coming out. So their answer to pets was what?
I said it's got pets.
Yeah, anyone can have a pet, and you can have all kinds of crazy pets. And you could put armor and things like that. You can actually level up armor and gear them as almost as well as you are in like Delphinid, like epic plate. That's great and all. The problem is they never decided to scale them past 50.
Yeah, personally, I love Arcage pets early on. I think they're a great grinding buddy. And I think pets serve a purpose. It'd be nice if pets stayed relevant, but they don't. They are an initiator, and then they die. And that's just the nature of Arcage pets. That said, I like how they handle pets. I like that it is simply, it's just another, it's like a mount, but it's like, hey, everyone can get a pet.
Can learn how to.
Everyone can get it. Again, it's fair, right? And there are pets that serve different areas of gameplay. There are pets that are better for 1v1ing. There are pets that are better for group play. There are pets that are better for exploration. And that is a very unique thing, and I really like that about Arcage. And the same conversation goes for mounts.
I also like how they do now. The big thing that they did a push for was non-combat pets. They can't even be attacked, but they float with you. They take up your pet slot, so you can't have another pet going, but it gives you buffs. It gives you usually a triggerable effect or something like that. And that's
I don't know how I feel about
that. Let's be real, they're a swipe cash shop item. I mean,
yes.
But
I'll be interested to see what place they take in Unchained. But I think that was them trying to make pets relevant to live game, because essentially, like, once your pet's killed, once you get CC'd and nuked and your pet's like, I'm being a good boy, I'm sitting right here, and that meteor crashes into his head, it's like, well, he's out of the fight. And so, making an invulnerable pet, it'd be interesting, again, so long as everyone's access is equal and that there's enough variety that I can have a pet that boosts an area of gameplay I want boosted, by all means, you know.
If it gives me some more hit points or it gives me a
Yeah.
3-second damage reduction buff or something like that, it's always that's nice additional perks. And yeah, in Arcage's sense, it gives it to anybody that has the pet. So I mean, that's great, and it's not restricted to class or limitation at that point, which is good.
Yeah.
So I guess are we pretty much at the
we've gone a little over. I mean, I'm not going to say we've definitely completely covered this subject at all, but I think we covered a lot of good points.
Do you want to keep running down this rabbit hole, or would you like to wrap it up for the day?
No, I say I think we could table what we got, and you know, we can always pick this conversation back up and reference where we've been. Good. But
especially when we get some devs in here with more direct attacks. I
think
friendly advice and loving.
That's right. You want hugs, devs? We love to talk about your pets and everything they do right. But no, I think ultimately, you know, there's a lot of generalizations to be made, but looking at specifics, looking at what was done right, what was done wrong would be the next step forward. And yeah, I would love to especially speak with devs of potential titles, because it is one of the biggest struggles of keeping your title relevant. Yeah, relative to your relevance, is keeping. I mean, the game's got to be fair, you know. And if it's not fair, you've got to have not only a method of detecting that within the player base, but a method in place to autocorrect that doesn't completely upset your player base.
Oh, and I guess, one last thing, and this is for all devs out there, anyone who is ever thinking about being a dev, and anyone that's looked at a dev sideways. Do not ever allow a game to have an AoE stun and the most powerful AoE nuke on the same class. This is not good game balance, ever.
He's looking at you, Dark Age of Camelot. Looking at you.
And Warhammer. And because you've done that twice, I'm hoping we don't see that in Camelot.
They're like, we got all these pieces. Well, we've already divided them up here. Let's just put them on this guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's and that's the thing is, it's fine to have those combos, but they need. Oh yeah, Bright Wizard cough.
Oh, it was so fun too. Everybody stand still. Here it comes.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, it's like, it's great to have those abilities, but you just need to spread them out among multiple classes so that you create power in players playing together as a team, as opposed to one guy being able to run into 5 guys and blow them up because he has an OP combo.
Yeah, I think here's the deal. Ultimately, you have to ask yourself, when you're looking at the different areas of gameplay, you have to say, what pieces do players need to bring to make this work? You need to identify those pieces. You need to make enough pieces to equal individual classes, at least on a minimum. And then you have to give each class a piece. Each class has to be necessary. And if they're not, you have to ask yourself, why? Why are they not? Does this boss not do enough of this debuff that only this class solves the problem for? You've got, and that's the challenge of balance, is you've got to look at each class and you have to make them each necessary in their own right. And again, the whole challenge of balancing is you see them, they'll just take, well, why cleanse when we could just put 3 of this class and out heal it or whatever, you know? And it's just like, well, you need to do things so that.
That's another thing we can put out to devs is never create an ability ever in a game that cannot be countered by at least one class in the game. It's fine that, like, you have an AoE sleep that puts a whole entire party to sleep for an hour and a half. I don't care. As long as the cleric has a self-purge and can then start casting single target cures for that sleep. Because if they can't, then you've completely
Everyone's
destroyed
at the mercy of that one class that is just more powerful than everybody else.
Right. Because crowd control wins. Crowd control has always been
every time.
There's not a game out there where crowd control is not the end-all, be-all. It is why stealth is powerful, too, is because it's an absolute. And crowd control is the same way. It's an absolute. I turn you off for whether it be 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever the ability allows me to do. If I can turn you off for that amount of time and then lay damage in you, especially if I have further combos where I can go, I turn you off for 3 seconds, do some damage, and then turn you off for 3 seconds, and then do some more damage, and I keep you juggling for a good 15 seconds, you don't get to play the game anymore. You're not actually enjoying the experience, you're just dying. But crowd control is key, and understanding how crowd control works and understanding how to counter crowd control is truly, in my opinion, what balance is in the MMO scape.
Yeah. And again, I think Arcade is a great example of crowd control. Some of the most effective crowd controls are roots, where it's like, I can still cast at what's in front of me. My hands are free. I just can't turn. I'm like, my leg, I'm trapped. I can't turn. And it's like, that's effective because I'm still able to play, and it's on the players to position themselves behind me to stay safe. All right. That's an effective. You're not completely disabled me, but you've done something that puts me at a disadvantage while still being able to play. So it's on me to be like, okay, I can't face my target. What other tools do I have in my toolbox to combat this threat without doing something like blowing my hard CC break? And sometimes you got to blow that hard CC break, but that's a decision that you as the player need to be allowed to make to counter your opponent who's trying to outthink you. And that is, in essence, that's the ultimate challenge of PvP, is everyone's got somewhat of that answer. But I think that's our...
control. Yep.
I'm reading some chat here. Yeah, I think that's our time for today, guys. I think we're going to cut it off, and we'll pick up this conversation some other time and keep going down this rabbit hole. Maybe get some people in here with specific experience, and we can talk about specific classes or specific elements of
game, that kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and I'd love to definitely look at current and future titles as well. But anything else before we leave, Malice?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for watching. I want everyone to also please go check out. We've started a Patreon, so we're trying to rally the troops so that we can help fund smart gaming.
We're just buying cookie dough with the money, though. It's just going to be cookie dough, guys. So, we need it. Cookie dough is important.
So go check out our Patreon. It's Smart Gamer Live, all one word. Also, Zaylin is running his solo show, which is called Built to Endure. It's going to be moved to Wednesday this week instead of our normal Thursday time slot because of his work schedule, which has screwed him up on last Sunday and all the other stuff. So that's going to be starting at 10 p.m. Eastern, and he's going to be talking about all things leadership in gaming.
There's two people there, Zaylin said in chat. I don't know who his special hidden secret guest is.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. He does have his other person because he realized he was really boring to listen to talking to himself.
I know. Zaylin, it's just impossible. Like, I just can't stay. I'm like, why are you still talking, Zaylin? I don't know what to do.
I sit here and talk by myself. Yeah, that's so I gotta have Puka to bounce off of. Wouldn't be interesting.
Yes, let the hate flow, Zaylin. Yes, come to the dark side.
All right, and also, if you guys are interested, you want to put in some input into what either MMO Grind does, what Smart Gamer Live does, or even Built to Endure does, join our Discord. Come to Smart Gamer Live Discord.
Zaylin going to link that in chat right now. Watch.
Yep, and I scream and holler and be like, hey, I want to hear about whatever. And we'll take your requests in, and you may see them appear on the next show. So
yeah, we love subject ideas, guys. We love, there's things that we think about, but, ultimately, the show's for y'all. And so we want to be talking about things you want to hear about and
find relevant to your gameplay.
Trust me, we have opinions on it. Rest assured,
I have an opinion on every aspect that has ever happened in an MMO. I think so.
Everything.
Down to role play, how they should bring back books that we can actually write in games, to hardcore PvP, to you name an aspect of the game. I have an opinion on it. So
gosh, that's great. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next time, and until then, have a great evening.
Yep. Have a good one.